In the spring of 1941, the air was thick with expectation and uncertainty. The world was at the brink of chaos, as nations clashed in a struggle that would change the course of history. Amidst this tumult, a young man from a small town in Ohio stood poised to take his place among the legends of the game of baseball. Bob Feller, a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians, was not only a rising star on the diamond but also a symbol of American resilience and pride. With his fastball that seemed to defy the laws of physics and a spirit that ignited the hearts of fans, he was destined for greatness. Yet, as the shadows of war loomed over the horizon, Bob faced a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of his life and career. As the season began, the stadium buzzed with energy. Fans filled the bleachers, their voices a chorus of hope and anticipation. Children clutched baseball gloves, dreaming of one day catching a foul ball from their hero. But Bob was not just a player, he was a man of principle, deeply aware of the growing conflict consuming Europe and beyond. News of the war dripped into everyday conversation, and the headlines screamed of battles fought and lives lost. The sirens of duty called to him, and with each passing game, Bob felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier on his shoulders. It was during one of those electric nights under the bright lights of the ballpark that Bob made his decision. The game was intense, and with every pitch, the crowd erupted. But as he scanned the stands, he saw not just fans, but families, fathers, brothers, and sons, who had been torn apart by the war. It struck him then, a realization that overshadowed the thrill of victory. There was a larger battle being waged beyond the diamond. That night, Bob Feller vowed to serve his country. With the world in turmoil, he felt an undeniable calling to put away his glove and take up a uniform. The next day, he walked into the recruitment office, his heart pounding but resolute. The line stretched before him, filled with men from all walks of life, ready to fight for their homeland. As he signed his name, Bob felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was no longer about baseball, it was about honor, sacrifice, and duty. He would leave the cheers of the crowds behind, stepping into a world where every day could be his last. His choice wasn't met with unanimous support. Some argued he was throwing away his career, abandoning the game that had earned him fame. But Bob, with his unwavering conviction, understood that some battles mattered more than personal glory. When the news broke that Bob Feller had enlisted in the Navy, it sent shockwaves through the sports community. Headlines flashed across newspapers, capturing the essence of a man who had chosen service over self. Fans felt a mixture of pride and sorrow, pride for his courageous decision and sorrow for the loss of the pitcher who had electrified the game. The baseball world had seen many stars, but few had ever matched the spirit of Bob Feller. He became more than a player, he was a beacon of hope, embodying the very heart of America. As he trained for his new life, Bob found camaraderie among fellow sailors. They shared stories of home, dreams of returning to the diamond, and the stark reality of war. The laughter of young men, once free to chase their passions, was now replaced by the harsh sounds of military drills. Bob threw baseballs during his free time, teaching his comrades the art of pitching and igniting a flicker of joy amidst the grueling routine. It was a reminder of the life he had left behind, but also a way to inspire those around him. They were not just soldiers, they were brothers in arms, fighting for a common cause. As the months turned into years, Bob served aboard the USS Alabama, witnessing the brutality of war firsthand. He faced the dangers of enemy fire, the chaos of battle, and the harsh realities of loss. Each day was a test of courage, a testament to the mettle of a man who had traded his dreams for duty. Amidst the chaos, his heart remained tethered to baseball. In letters home, he spoke of his longing to return to the game, to hear the crack of the bat and feel the thrill of the crowd once more. His words resonated with fans who followed his journey, their hearts heavy with anticipation. Bob became a symbol of hope not only for his fellow soldiers but also for the American public. His story was splashed across the front pages, inspiring a generation to look beyond their struggles and unite for the greater good. With each mission, he carried a piece of the game with him, a reminder of what he was fighting for. He understood that every pitch he had thrown was an echo of the freedom he sought to protect. Hope was a powerful motivator, and as he faced the uncertainties of war, it fueled his determination to succeed. Finally, in 1945, as the war began to wane, Bob returned home. The streets of his hometown were lined with flags, the air thick with anticipation for the return of the heroes. As he stepped off the train, he was met with cheers and tears. Friends and fans rushed to embrace him, their gratitude palpable. Bob Feller was not just a soldier, he was a celebrated hero who had given his all for his country. But there was another battle awaiting him, one that involved stepping back onto the diamond where his legacy had begun. As he stood in front of the crowd once more, a rush of memories flooded his mind, the cheers of the fans, the thrill of competition, the weight of expectations. Bob Feller hadn't just returned to baseball, he was ready to inspire a new generation. His journey through war had shaped him, but the call of the game was strong. In that moment, he knew that he would not only reclaim his place in baseball history but also share a message of courage and resilience that would resonate for decades to come. And so, as the crowd erupted in applause, Bob Feller stood tall at the center of the field, a symbol of hope, a champion of the people. His story was far from over, it was just beginning, and those who had followed him through the trials of war would now witness his return to glory. If you want to continue this journey with us and discover more inspiring tales from history, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination are just a click away, waiting to inspire you as they have inspired generations before. The recruitment office was bustling with men from all walks of life, each driven by a sense of duty, a yearning to fight for their country, and a hope to bring peace back to the world. Bob felt out of place for just a moment, his stature and presence so often celebrated on the baseball field contrasting sharply with the grim determination etched into the faces around him. Yet, as he stepped forward, he could feel the weight of his decision solidifying within him. When he approached the desk, the officer looked up from a stack of forms. Bob cleared his throat, the sound barely audible above the chatter. "I'm here to enlist," he said, his voice steady but laced with the gravity of the moment. The officer raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sight of a young man so celebrated in the public eye willing to forsake his fame. "Are you sure about this?" the officer asked, his tone a mix of respect and concern. "You could have an illustrious career ahead of you." "I know," Bob replied, his resolve unwavering. "But there's a war going on. People are suffering. I want to do my part." With each word, he felt the certainty of his choice strengthen. There was a noble fight beyond the baseball field, one that called to him more powerfully than any crowd-pleasing game. As Bob signed the papers, he felt a mixture of excitement and fear. He was embarking on a journey that would take him far from the familiar confines of the ballpark and into the uncertain chaos of war. His decision would not only change the course of his life, but it would also resonate with countless fans and fellow citizens who would come to view him as a hero, not just for his athletic prowess, but for his courage and sacrifice. Weeks passed, and Bob underwent training that would set the foundation for his role as a Navy pilot. He learned to navigate the skies, maneuvering through rigorous exercises that tested both his physical and mental limits. It was a far cry from the quiet summer evenings spent under the stadium lights, but Bob embraced the challenge with the same fervor he had for baseball. Each flight was a reminder of his commitment and the lives that depended on him. One evening, after a long day of training, Bob sat in the barracks, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of his teammates, the fans who cheered him on, and the children who looked up to him as a role model. He felt the weight of their expectations and the inspiration he could offer. It was then that he made another silent vow. He would use his platform to encourage others to support the war effort, to rally the nation behind those fighting far away. As the months rolled on, the war escalated, and the news from the front lines grew darker. Bob's heart ached for the families of soldiers who faced unimaginable loss. He began to realize that his role as a pilot was not just about flying, it was also about connecting with people back home. He started writing letters to local newspapers, sharing snippets of life in the Navy, encouraging his fellow Americans to support the troops, whether through buying war bonds or volunteering in local efforts. Though he was now far from the baseball diamond, Bob's spirit remained unbroken. The lessons of teamwork, resilience, and perseverance he had learned on the field translated seamlessly into his life as a soldier. He developed camaraderie with his fellow pilots, finding strength in their shared mission. Together, they trained tirelessly, preparing for the challenges that awaited them. One day, while on a training mission over the vast expanse of the ocean, Bob experienced a moment of clarity as he gazed down at the endless blue below him. There was something humbling about being up there, the world beneath him a tapestry of life and hope. He took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. He realized that this was his new battleground, a place where he could make a difference, not just for himself but for all those who believed in him. As the year wore on, the war intensified, and Bob's training shifted focus to combat readiness. He participated in daring missions, flying over enemy territory, risking his life to protect his nation. With each takeoff, he carried the hopes of countless people with him, reminding himself of the fans who had cheered for him, and the families who supported the war effort. He was not just fighting for victory in battle, he was fighting for the very ideals that made America great. In the midst of the chaos, Bob found solace in small moments. He wrote home often, sharing tales of bravery and friendship, instilling pride in those who read his words. He became an ambassador for the troops, his letters a lifeline connecting the battlefield to the heart of America. Bob understood that while he was away, the spirit of the game of baseball lived on in the hearts of those who yearned for normalcy amid the turmoil. As the war progressed, Bob's name became synonymous with courage and sacrifice. The country had rallied behind the brave men and women who fought for freedom, and Bob's story was woven into the fabric of that collective effort. He inspired many to enlist, to work harder on the home front, and to cherish the freedoms they had often taken for granted. One fateful day, days turned into months of anticipation as news spread of an impending battle. Bob, now an experienced aviator, prepared himself and his crew for what lay ahead. There was a palpable tension in the air, a mixture of fear and determination. They were about to embark on a mission that could turn the tide of war. As he sat in the cockpit, he reflected on how far he had come from the baseball diamond. The stakes were higher now, but so was his resolve. Amidst the roar of engines and the rush of adrenaline, Bob thought of his dreams and the sacrifices that had led him here. He remembered the cheers of the crowd, the joy of the game, and the sense of purpose he had found beyond the diamond. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in him. In the face of adversity, Bob Feller had become more than a baseball player, he had become a symbol of hope, courage, and resilience. His story was one of sacrifice and dedication, and it was far from over. As he soared through the skies, he knew he was part of something much larger than himself, a legacy that would inspire generations to come. If you find this story compelling, consider subscribing to our channel. Join us on this journey through history, where heroes emerge from the most unlikely places, and courage shines even in the darkest of times. As Bob Feller stepped into the recruitment office, the smell of polished wood and fresh ink filled his senses. It was a stark contrast to the lively ballpark he had left behind. The hustle and bustle of everyday life outside faded into the background as he approached the counter. The officer behind it looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and respect. Here was a man who had captivated thousands with his baseball prowess, yet he was now choosing to put it all aside for something far greater than himself. "Bob Feller," he said, the name rolling off his tongue with a hint of awe. "What brings you here?" Bob took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision settle on him like a heavy coat. "I want to enlist. I want to serve my country." The officer nodded, his demeanor turning serious. He began the process of filling out the necessary paperwork, asking Bob questions that felt almost surreal. Did he have any prior military experience? Did he understand the risks involved? Each question brought him closer to a world that was both daunting and exhilarating. Bob answered with conviction, knowing full well that this path could lead to sacrifice, perhaps the ultimate sacrifice. As the ink dried on the documents, Bob felt a rush of emotions. He was leaving behind the cheers of fans, the camaraderie of teammates, and the life he had always known. In that moment, he was not just a ball player, he was a soldier in the making, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. He thought of the young boys who idolized him, of the men and women who had already answered the call. This was a chance to inspire them, to show that true courage often meant stepping into the unknown. The following weeks passed in a blur. Bob said his goodbyes to teammates and friends, each farewell tinged with sorrow and pride. He traded his baseball cap for a military helmet, his jersey for a uniform. The transition was stark, yet he felt a deep sense of purpose. As he embarked on his journey into the Navy, he was not just another recruit, he was Bob Feller, the man who had chosen duty over fame. Boot camp was a different world altogether. Days turned into grueling training sessions, where every moment tested his strength, endurance, and resolve. The camaraderie among the recruits was palpable, reminiscent of the locker room banter he had known as a player. They shared stories of their lives before the war, dreams of returning home, and hopes of making a difference. Each man brought his own story, filling the barracks with laughter and occasional tears. Bob felt a bond forming, a brotherhood that transcended the realm of baseball. One chilly morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, Bob stood at attention alongside his fellow recruits. His heart swelled with pride as the flag was raised, its colors vibrant against the sky. The magnitude of their mission began to sink in, a mission that would stretch across oceans, into the very heart of danger itself. He remembered the faces of the families who had gathered at the ballpark, who had cheered him on, and who now looked to the soldiers to protect their freedoms. Bob's resolve strengthened, he would not let them down. After months of rigorous training, Bob received news that would change his life once more. He was to be assigned to the USS Alabama, a battleship that would see action in the Pacific Theater. The announcement sent a thrill through him, this was where he could make a real impact. As he prepared for deployment, he thought of the game he loved so deeply. How similar this was to stepping onto the mound, where every pitch mattered, where each moment could turn the tide. He was ready to play his part, not just for himself, but for his country, for his team, for every soul who believed in the American spirit. The day of departure was filled with an array of emotions. Bob stood on the dock, watching the families of his fellow sailors wave goodbye. In their eyes, he saw the same mix of hope and fear that filled his heart. He thought of the sacrifices they were all making. The ship loomed large, its hull cutting through the water like a force of nature. As he stepped aboard, he felt the weight of history surrounding him. Life on the USS Alabama was a far cry from the ballpark. The ship groaned under the weight of its mission, and the sea often threw all its might against them. Bob learned the ropes quickly, adapting to the life of a sailor. He found solace in the routine, in the way every man had a job that contributed to the whole. Just as in baseball, teamwork was essential. They trained tirelessly, preparing for the battles that lay ahead. As weeks turned into months, the letters began to pour in from fans, young kids, and former teammates. They wrote to him about how proud they were, how they had been inspired by his decision. Bob cherished each letter, feeling as if he had stepped into a new role, one of a leader, a beacon of hope. For many of them, he was no longer just Bob Feller, the pitcher, he was Bob Feller, the soldier, fighting for their future. The day finally came when the USS Alabama found itself in the midst of a fierce conflict. The ship was a floating fortress, bristling with guns and men ready to defend their homeland. Bob felt adrenaline coursing through his veins as alarms rang and orders echoed across the deck. He was part of something far greater than baseball now. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a fierce determination. He was there to protect the ideals of honor and freedom, not just for himself, but for all those who looked up to him. As the ship engaged in battle, Bob found himself reflecting on the paths that had brought him here. The cheers from the stands, the thrill of the pitch, and the calls of duty had converged into this very moment. He knew he was not just fighting for victory, he was fighting for every dream that had ever been held, every child that had ever looked up to him. In the chaos of war, he held on to the spirit of the game that had taught him resilience, teamwork, and the unyielding will to succeed. Through it all, Bob Feller remained a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of sacrifice, and a reminder that sometimes, the greatest glory lies not in the accolades of fame, but in the quiet strength of a heart willing to serve. The world was watching, and Bob was ready to inspire generations, both on the field and off. As the thunderous booms of cannon fire echoed around him, Bob realized that this was his new field, a vast, unyielding expanse where bravery was the only way to score. The story of Bob Feller, the pitcher who traded his glove for a rifle, was just beginning. If you've enjoyed this chapter of history, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales from the past that illuminate the bravery and resilience of those who came before us. Join us as we continue to uncover the stories that shaped our world. Sunshine at the ballpark, where the cheers of fans and the crack of the bat were the only sounds that filled his ears. Now, the roar of engines and the chaos of military drills surrounded him, each day a reminder of the reality he had chosen. Bob found camaraderie with fellow recruits, men who had also left behind their own dreams and aspirations. They shared stories of home, their laughter a temporary balm against the uncertainty of the future. Yet, there were moments of solemn reflection, times when the weight of what lay ahead would settle heavily on their shoulders. Bob often thought of his parents, how proud they must have felt seeing him play in front of thousands. He wondered how they would feel about his choice now. As the weeks wore on, Bob's training intensified. The instructors pushed them hard, demanding precision and discipline. Flying a plane was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The thrill of takeoff was matched only by the terrifying realization of the responsibilities that lay in his hands. Each time he soared into the sky, he felt a surge of exhilaration, but it was always accompanied by the knowledge that this new skill was being honed for a purpose far greater than himself. One crisp morning, Bob and his squadron were called to the airfield for a special briefing. The air was thick with anticipation as they gathered around a table covered with maps and tactical plans. An officer, stern and serious, outlined the details of an upcoming mission. They were to support ground troops in a strategic operation that would see them flying into enemy territory. The officer's voice was resolute, but Bob could sense the tension among his fellow pilots. They were being asked to risk their lives, to face an enemy that had already shown their ruthlessness time and again. As the briefing concluded, Bob felt a wave of determination wash over him. He looked at the faces around him, each one reflecting a mix of fear and resolve. They were brothers in arms now, bound by a shared duty to protect their homeland. In that moment, he understood that he wasn't just flying for himself, he was flying for every person who believed in freedom, for every family who had been torn apart by the horrors of war. The gravity of his mission weighed heavily on him, yet it also ignited a fierce sense of purpose within his heart. The day of the mission arrived with the dawn breaking over the horizon, casting a golden hue over the airfield. Bob suited up in his flight gear, the fabric feeling both foreign and familiar. As he approached his plane, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the reality of the moment. He could hear the distant rumble of engines and the hurried voices of his fellow pilots preparing for takeoff. Climbing into the cockpit, Bob felt a rush of adrenaline. He ran through the pre-flight checks with meticulous care, each task a reminder of the training that had brought him here. As he looked out over the airfield, he caught a glimpse of the American flag waving proudly in the morning breeze. It was a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the very freedom he was fighting to protect. As the engines roared to life, Bob felt the vibrations of the aircraft seep into his bones. He looked to his right, meeting the eyes of his wingman, a young man named Tom. They shared a nod of understanding, a silent promise to watch each other's backs. With a final glance at the ground, Bob pushed the throttle forward, and the plane surged down the runway, lifting into the sky. The world below shrank away, replaced by the vast expanse of blue. As they climbed higher, Bob's heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. He could see the formation of planes flying alongside them, a fleet of comrades ready to face the unknown together. The view was breathtaking, yet he knew that the beauty of the sky was about to be marred by the reality of war. As they crossed the front lines, the atmosphere shifted. The communication radio crackled with chatter, pilots relaying information and receiving instructions. Bob's pulse quickened as they approached their target area. The landscapes below, once a patchwork of green fields and quiet towns, were now fraught with tension. The distant thud of artillery fire echoed in the air, a reminder of the conflict below. Suddenly, alarms blared through the cockpit. Bob's instincts kicked in as he and Tom maneuvered their planes into a defensive formation. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around them, tracer rounds lighting up the sky like fireworks. Bob felt a rush of adrenaline as he maneuvered his aircraft, dodging the deadly fire. In that moment, the thrill of flying was replaced by a primal need to survive, to protect not only himself but also his comrades. With his heart pounding in his chest, Bob focused on his mission. He guided his plane toward the designated target, adrenaline coursing through him. The ground came alive with explosions, and the reality of war settled heavily upon him. He was no longer just a baseball player, he was a soldier, a protector of freedom, and he would fight with every ounce of strength within him. In the chaos of the moment, he spotted enemy positions below, quickly relaying the information to his squadron. Together, they coordinated their attacks, ensuring that they maximized their impact while minimizing their losses. The camaraderie forged back in training blossomed into something deeper. They were working as a cohesive unit, each man relying on the others to ensure they all made it back home. As the battle continued to rage around them, Bob felt a sense of clarity in the chaos. Each maneuver was not just a tactic, it was a testament to the commitment he had made the day he enlisted. He recalled the faces of his family, his friends, and the fans who cheered for him, and that memory propelled him forward. He knew that the stakes were high, but he was resolute in his decision. He was ready to fight for the land he loved, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. As they returned to base, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the airfield. Bob's heart was still racing, a mixture of relief and pride flooding through him. They had accomplished what they set out to do, and in doing so, he had discovered a new sense of purpose. In that moment, he knew he would never return to his life as it once was. He would carry the weight of this experience with him, a reminder of the sacrifices made in the name of freedom. Bob's journey was only beginning, and as he looked out over the airfield, he felt a surge of inspiration. He had embarked on a path that would shape not only his life but also the lives of countless others. His story would resonate, and he could only hope that those who heard it would be inspired to serve, to act, and to remember the importance of standing up for what is right. As he stepped out of the cockpit, he felt the rush of camaraderie and pride. His journey as a soldier was just beginning, and with each passing day, he would forge a legacy that would extend far beyond the baseball diamond. He had traded one field for another, but his heart remained steadfast, committed to serving his country and inspiring generations to come. Join us as we continue to explore the remarkable life of Bob Feller, a true hero who not only left a legacy in sports but also in service to his nation. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the courage and commitment of those who shaped our history. Final guard, Bob was acutely aware that he was becoming part of something much larger than himself. As he trained, he found a new rhythm, learning how to march in unison with his fellow soldiers. The drills were grueling, and the days stretched long into the evenings, but within him blossomed a determination that hadn't existed in the same way on the baseball field. Each drop of sweat became a testament to his commitment. Days turned into weeks, and Bob quickly adapted to life as a soldier. The camaraderie among his unit was as vital as the friendships he had formed in the major leagues. They bonded over shared hardships, exchanged stories, and often reminisced about home. But unlike the sport he loved, there was a somber weight to their conversations as they spoke of the world outside their training camp, a world torn apart by war. The noise of distant gunfire sometimes echoed through the air, a reminder of the reality they were about to face. In an unexpected twist, Bob found himself in the spotlight once again, albeit in a different capacity. The military recognized his fame and used it to boost morale. His new role involved a mixture of training and public appearances, where he spoke to young recruits and older veterans alike. The message was clear: serving one's country was a noble endeavor, and it was something anyone could aspire to, regardless of their background. One day, after a particularly intense training session, Bob was asked to speak at a local rally. The event was packed with soldiers, their families, and townsfolk eager to show their support. As he stood before the crowd, dressed in his uniform, he felt a surge of purpose. The cheers he received were not for home runs or strikeouts but for his choice to serve. He spoke passionately about sacrifice, honor, and the importance of standing united in the face of adversity. He urged everyone to do their part, to contribute in whatever way they could. The crowd listened, rapt and inspired, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and hope. "Courage isn't just wearing a uniform," he said, his voice steady. It's about doing what's right even when it's hard. It's about fighting for each other and for our future. The applause that followed made his heart swell with pride. In that moment, he understood that he had become more than just a pitcher, he was a symbol of resilience and determination. As the months rolled on, Bob's commitment deepened. He received orders that would take him overseas, to the front lines of a conflict that was ravaging Europe. The gravity of the situation settled heavily upon him, but he embraced the challenge. The thrill of playing baseball paled in comparison to the responsibility he felt towards his fellow soldiers and his country. He knew they would face unimaginable trials, but he was resolved to stand by them, to face whatever came next. When the day arrived for Bob and his unit to ship out, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation and anxiety. Families gathered at the docks, waving goodbye to their loved ones, tears mingling with pride. Bob felt a lump form in his throat as he exchanged final goodbyes with his comrades. He recalled the cheers he had received on the baseball diamond, but this felt different. This was about duty, sacrifice, and the hope of returning home safely. The journey across the ocean was filled with uncertainty. Each day on the ship brought new fears and hopes, yet Bob remained steadfast. He shared stories with his fellow soldiers, reminiscing about life in the States, about home runs and double plays, grounding their shared experiences in the mundane joys of life before the war. It was a way to keep spirits high, to remind everyone that there was a world worth fighting for. As they approached the shores of Europe, the reality of war loomed larger than life. The sounds of battle echoed in the distance, and the soldiers on board could feel the tension build. Bob looked out upon the horizon, steeling himself for the unknown. He thought about the boys back home, the young fans who had once hung on his every pitch. What would they think of him now? Would they see the man he had become, not just in the eyes of a player but a soldier? He hoped to inspire them, just as he had always tried to do. When they finally disembarked, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of damp earth. The chaos of war was palpable, a stark contrast to the peaceful ballparks he had known. Bob and his fellow soldiers were thrust into a world of uncertainty, where every decision could mean life or death. Yet, amidst the chaos, Bob found purpose. He was part of a brotherhood now, one that transcended the game he had loved. Together, they pushed forward, navigating the obstacles ahead, driven by the hope of victory and the longing to return home. Throughout the harrowing experiences that followed, Bob remembered the lessons learned on the baseball field: teamwork, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of pushing through adversity. He became a source of strength for those around him, encouraging them to stay strong, to lean on one another. The bonds formed in those trying times were as unbreakable as the friendships he had forged back home. As Bob faced the trials of war, the memories of his days spending hours perfecting a fastball never left him. He often found solace in the thought of returning to the pitcher's mound, the familiar rhythm of the game a comforting reminder of who he was before the war. But for now, his focus was on the mission at hand, on protecting his comrades and fulfilling his duty to his country. In the coming days, as battles raged around them, each moment became a testament to bravery and sacrifice. Bob's heart swelled with pride, knowing he was doing what he had set out to do, serving his country, inspiring others, and making a difference. He was not just a ballplayer anymore, he was a soldier, ready to make his mark in a way he had never imagined. The echoes of the crowd cheering his name faded, but the mission before him was clearer than any game he had ever played. Bob Feller stood resolute, embodying the spirit of a nation, ready to face the future, knowing that his journey would inspire generations to come. If you want to hear more stories of courage and determination, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Join us as we continue to explore the untold tales of those who shaped history through their bravery and sacrifice. The sun began to rise over the airfield, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As the warm light spilled across the ground, Bob Feller stood beside his aircraft, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. This was no longer just a plane, it was a symbol of his commitment, a vessel of hope for those he was about to serve. The gravity of the mission weighed heavily on him, but with it came a sense of purpose that drove him to push through the fear that threatened to creep in. The air was charged with an electric energy as fellow pilots checked their gear, exchanging quiet nods and murmured encouragements. They were more than just comrades, They were a family forged in fire, united by their shared sacrifices and dreams. Bob remembered the cheers from the ballparks, the thrill of the game, and how those moments seemed so distant now. Yet, as he looked around at his fellow airmen, he recognized that their fight was just as noble and worthy of admiration. The briefing had been intense. The officer had painted a vivid picture of the operation, detailing the enemy's positions and the risks they would face. He spoke of bravery and duty, emphasizing that their efforts could shift the tide of war. Each word resonated deep within Bob, igniting a fiery determination that pushed aside any lingering hesitation. This was a defining moment, and he knew he had to step up, not just as a soldier but as a leader. Before they took to the skies, Bob took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp morning air mixed with the scent of oil and fuel. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, picturing the faces of his parents, of the fans who had cheered him on from the stands. The image of his father, with pride shining in his eyes, filled him with a sense of strength. This was about more than glory, it was about protecting those he loved and standing up for what was right. As the engines roared to life, Bob felt the vibrations coursing through his body. He climbed into the cockpit, aware of the responsibility resting on his shoulders. The plane's controls felt familiar yet foreign, a twisting amalgamation of instinct and training. He was no longer just a pitcher, he was a soldier, a protector flying into the heart of danger. The squadron took off in formation, the planes slicing through the clouds like arrows shot from a bow. Below them, the world blurred into a patchwork of greens and browns, a stark contrast to the vibrant fields of his youth. As they ascended higher, the adrenaline surged, filling him with a mixture of exhilaration and dread. He thought about the lives hanging in the balance, the soldiers on the ground relying on them to provide cover and support. With each passing minute, the tension grew. The radio crackled with communication from command, relaying updates and instructions. Bob's heart raced as they neared the target zone, the enemy territory looming ahead like a dark storm cloud. He could feel his pulse quicken as they approached the moment of truth. He glanced at his fellow pilots, their expressions a blend of determination and apprehension. They were ready to dive headfirst into the unknown. As they entered the fray, the landscape erupted in chaos. Anti-aircraft fire streaked through the sky like deadly fireworks, forcing Bob to maneuver with precision. The once calm blue above transformed into a battlefield, a stark reminder of the perils they faced. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he pushed the limits of his aircraft, navigating through the barrage of enemy fire. It was a dance of life and death, one that he had never imagined he would be a part of. Bob's focus sharpened as he engaged in the mission. He recalled every lesson, every drill, and the countless hours spent training for this moment. He was not just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the men on the ground, for the families waiting for news, for a future free from tyranny. In the midst of it all, he felt a connection to his past. Every pitch, every game had been leading him to this very moment. The roar of gunfire filled his ears, mingling with the sound of his own heartbeat. As he took aim at his targets, he felt the weight of his duty pressing upon him. Victory was not guaranteed, but Bob knew that he would face whatever came next with courage and resolve. Each pull of the trigger felt like a step toward reclaiming hope, a chance to turn the tide of darkness that had enveloped the world. In the midst of the chaos, Bob's squadron moved as one. They were a well-oiled machine, each man knowing his role, each pilot covering the other's back. Bob felt a surge of pride for his comrades, for the sacrifices they had all made. They were more than just soldiers, they were pioneers in a fight for freedom, carving their names into the pages of history. As the mission progressed, they began to see the fruits of their labor. The enemy's defenses weakened, and the ground troops below began to advance with renewed vigor. Bob felt a swell of hope, a glimmer of what victory could look like. Yet, as they continued, the reality of war reminded them of its unyielding cruelty. Losses were felt deeply, and the faces of fallen comrades haunted their thoughts. It was a stark reminder of the cost of freedom, a burden each soldier carried in silence. After what felt like an eternity, they received the signal to retreat. Bob turned his plane towards home, the weight of their mission heavy on his heart. They had faced the storm and emerged, but not without scars. As they landed back at the airfield, a mixture of relief and sorrow washed over him. They had accomplished what they set out to do, but the price had been steep. Stepping out of the cockpit, he looked up at the sky, now painted with the colors of the setting sun. The cheers of the fans from the ballpark echoed in his mind, but this time, it was different. It was not the cheers of victory in a game, it was the quiet gratitude of a nation that could breathe a sigh of relief. Bob had traded the diamond for the sky, the cheers for the camaraderie of those who dared to dream of a better world. As the day faded into night, Bob felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had found his calling in the midst of war, a chance to inspire not just through his past but through his present sacrifices. Bob Feller had become more than a pitcher, he had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage could shine through. As he walked away from the airfield, Bob knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles to fight, more sacrifices to be made, and he was ready to face them all. For those who looked up to him, for the future he believed in, he would continue to serve, embodying the spirit of resilience and bravery that defined the greatest generation. If you wish to follow Bob's journey, to witness the strength of those who serve, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Join us as we delve deeper into the stories of courage and honor that shaped our world during these tumultuous times. Bob Feller stood on the makeshift stage, the sun casting long shadows across the crowd assembled before him. His uniform, crisp and pressed, was a vivid reminder of the commitment he had made to his country. As he looked out into the sea of faces, soldiers adorned with their ranks, families with worried yet proud expressions, and townsfolk eager to show their support, he felt a swell of emotions rise within him. It wasn't the roar of the crowd he was used to from his days on the baseball diamond, but there was a resonance in their cheers that struck a deeper chord. Each of us has a role to play in this great conflict, he began, his voice steady yet impassioned. It doesn't matter if you're at the front lines, in a factory, or at home caring for loved ones. Every effort counts. Every sacrifice matters. His words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of the situation they all faced. The audience listened intently, a mix of hope and fear reflected in their eyes. Bob couldn't help but recall the joy and excitement he felt stepping onto the pitcher's mound, the thrill of the game. Yet, here he was, facing a different kind of challenge. The stakes were undeniably higher. He was no longer simply Bob Feller, the baseball star, he was now Bob Feller, a soldier in the fight for freedom. He remembered the conversations he had shared with his fellow soldiers, discussions filled with dreams of returning home, dreams that were often tinged with the unsettling reality of war. As he continued to speak, he shared stories not only of his own experiences but of the sacrifices made by countless others. He spoke of the young men who had left behind bustling cities and small towns, families who anxiously awaited their return, and the camaraderie that developed in the face of adversity. Each tale was a thread in the larger tapestry of their shared struggle. The crowd was captivated, caught between the gravity of his words and the flickering flame of hope they ignited. After he finished speaking, the applause resonated like a thunderstorm, echoing off the nearby buildings. Bob stepped down from the stage, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. There was much to be done, and he was determined to lead by example. In the days that followed, he immersed himself in training, pushing himself to new limits. The drills were exhausting, but he embraced the challenge, knowing that his actions might inspire others. The military was not just about combat, it was a brotherhood, a bond forged in the fires of shared struggles. Bob made it a point to connect with each member of his unit, hearing their stories and sharing in their fears. There was Joe from New Jersey, who dreamed of opening a diner after the war, and Sam from Mississippi, who longed to return to his family farm. These connections strengthened his resolve, making the sacrifices they were all making feel a little less daunting. As the months rolled on, Bob's training intensified. He honed his skills not only as a soldier but also as a leader. The military recognized the value of his celebrity status, and he was often called upon to boost morale among the troops. His presence inspired confidence, he became a living testament to the strength of their collective commitment. He participated in drills, led exercises, and even organized friendly baseball games between units. It was a reminder of normalcy amidst the chaos, a chance for everyone to relax and enjoy a piece of the life they had left behind. But life as a soldier was not without its dark realities. The rumble of distant artillery became a haunting reminder of the battles that lay ahead. Bob knew that while they trained for combat, each day could be their last. The weight of that knowledge rested heavily on his heart, but it also fueled his determination to inspire those around him. He often found himself reflecting on the sacrifices he had made, his career, his dreams of baseball glory, but he knew deep down that this was a fight worth waging. One fateful evening, Bob and his unit received word that they would be deployed overseas. The news sent a ripple of anxiety through the camp, but it was also a call to arms. As they packed their belongings, each soldier carried with them not only their gear but memories of home, dreams, and a fierce dedication to their mission. Bob took a moment to look at his fellow soldiers, faces that had become familiar, friends who had shared laughter and tears in the face of uncertainty. As they boarded the transport plane, unease settled in the pit of Bob's stomach, but he steeled himself against it. They were about to embark on a journey that would test their mettle, a journey where courage would be the only armor they had. He glanced around, observing the silent resolve that surrounded him. Each man was lost in his thoughts, contemplating the uncertainty of what lay before them. As the plane ascended into the gray sky, Bob closed his eyes, recalling the cheers of the fans from the baseball stadium, the crack of the bat, and the thrill of striking out a batter. He knew those days were behind him now, but he felt a sense of purpose swell within him. He would no longer be just a pitcher, he would be a fighter for freedom, a protector of the ideals he cherished. When they landed in a foreign land, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The sights and sounds were unlike anything Bob had ever experienced. The air was filled with the acrid smell of smoke, and the distant echoes of conflict served as a reminder of their mission. Yet, amid the chaos, he found a familiar rhythm. The discipline of baseball transferred seamlessly to the military. Bob found himself applying the same strategies he had learned on the field to his new role as a soldier. In the weeks that followed, Bob and his unit faced numerous challenges. Each day brought new trials, but they persevered, drawing strength from their bond. They shared stories, laughter, and the occasional baseball game whenever they could find the time. Bob became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, camaraderie and courage could light the way. As the war raged on, the lessons Bob had learned in both baseball and the military intertwined. He realized that glory could come not only from victory on the field but also from standing shoulder to shoulder with his brothers in arms. Together, they fought for a cause greater than themselves, for freedom, justice, and a future worth fighting for. And so, as they prepared for what lay ahead, Bob Feller, the fighter, stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. He knew that he would forever be changed, shaped by experiences that transcended the diamond. The echoes of his past and the dreams of his future melded into a singular purpose: to serve, inspire, and honor the sacrifices made by countless others. As the engines roared to life, Bob felt the vibrations coursing through his body. He climbed into the cockpit, aware of the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. This was not just a flight, it was a mission steeped in the realities of war, where every moment counted and the stakes were immeasurable. His fingers brushed over the controls, a touch that held years of practice and dreams now intertwined with the harsh realities of conflict. His fellow pilots settled into their planes, the airfield bustling with activity. Each one of them was acutely aware of what lay ahead, the uncertainty cloaked in the bravado of youth and camaraderie. The morning light cast long shadows on the ground, and as Bob glanced at his comrades, he saw not just fellow airmen but brothers in arms, men who had left everything behind to take flight for a cause greater than themselves. Bob took a moment to look down the runway, where the vast expanse of sky awaited them. It was both daunting and exhilarating. Memories of the baseball diamond flooded back to him, the cheers of the crowd, the thrill of a home run. It felt like a lifetime ago. But this was a different kind of game, one with much higher stakes. As he tightened his grip on the controls, he reminded himself that he had traded the cheers of thousands for the resolve of a few good men. With a final nod to his squadron leader, Bob set his sights on the horizon. The planes began to roll forward, one by one, gathering speed as they raced down the runway. The world outside blurred into a whirl of color and sound, and within moments, Bob felt the familiar sensation of lift. The ground slipped away beneath him, and the sky opened up, vast and endless. For a fleeting moment, he was free. The weight of war seemed to dissipate, allowing him to revel in the beauty of flight. But soon reality settled back in. Ahead lay the enemy territory, the very heart of the conflict that had drawn him from the ballparks of America. Bob's heart raced as he navigated the clouds, his mind sharpening with focus. Each pilot was part of a larger strategy, a plan designed to strike hard and ensure victory. As they approached the target area, the tension within the cockpit rose palpably. Bob followed the lead plane, glancing at the instruments that flickered with information. They were nearing the enemy lines, and the landscape below seemed to shift ominously as the clouds parted to reveal the terrain marred by war. The sight was a stark reminder of the destruction that had already occurred, lives disrupted and futures altered. The radio crackled to life, the commander's voice breaking through the silence. "Stay sharp, gentlemen. We're nearly there. Remember your training." Bob's heart pounded, an echo of the cheers he once heard at games, now replaced with the urgency of the moment. He gripped the controls tighter, his knuckles white against the metal. Then, as if fate itself had intervened, gunfire erupted from below. Flak bursts danced in the sky, a deadly rain of shrapnel that threatened to rip through their formation. Bob instinctively banked his plane, weaving through the chaos as he fought to keep his composure. Around him, planes were hit, spiraling downward in plumes of smoke and fire. His breath caught in his throat as he witnessed the sacrifice of his comrades. It was a brutal reminder that this was no game, and the stakes were life and death. "Keep your formation. Stay together." Bob's voice rang out over the radio, attempting to rally the squadron amidst panic and fear. The lessons of leadership he had learned on the field came rushing back to him. He pushed aside his own terror, focusing on the lives of those around him. He had not only trained as a pilot but had also learned the importance of encouraging those who looked to him for guidance. With renewed determination, Bob led his squadron through the barrage. They dove and climbed, maneuvering through the hostile skies. The weight of every lost comrade hung heavy in his heart, yet he pressed on, knowing that each second could mean the difference between life and death for his brothers in arms. As they neared their target, a vital enemy installation, Bob's pulse quickened. He could see the ground forces preparing for the assault, and with a swift decision, he called for the attack. "Now! Dive in formation." The squadron plunged toward their target, unleashing a hail of fire while aiming carefully. The explosions rocked the ground beneath them, sending debris flying into the air. In that moment, amidst the chaos, Bob felt a surge of pride. Here he was, not merely a baseball player but a soldier, fighting for something meaningful. The cheers from the stands of his youth had transformed into the roar of engines and the cries of valor. He was part of something far greater than himself, a legacy that would echo through generations. As the dust settled and they pulled out of their dive, Bob glanced back at his squadron. They had succeeded in their mission, they had fought and emerged victorious, albeit at a cost. The sky was now a canvas painted with the remnants of battle, and as they made their way home, the echoes of those they had lost lingered in the air. Safely back on the airfield, Bob climbed out of the cockpit, his legs shaky yet filled with a resolute strength. He was tired but fulfilled. He had chosen to serve his country and had inspired those around him in ways he never thought possible. The glory he once sought on the baseball diamond paled in comparison to the bonds formed in the heat of battle. As he looked around, he realized that the true victory lay not just in the mission completed but in the shared experiences of courage and sacrifice. Bob Feller, the pitcher who had sacrificed his stardom, had become something even more profound, a symbol of bravery, resilience, and unity. In the years to come, his story would inspire countless others to rise above their fears, to choose duty over personal gain, and to embrace the call of service. As he walked away from the airfield, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose. The journey he had taken was far from over, and he knew the lessons learned in the skies would resonate long after the war had ended. As you reflect on these tales of courage and sacrifice, consider subscribing to our channel. Join us as we continue to explore the stories of those who answer the call of duty, inspiring generations to come. Share in the legacy of heroes, and never forget the sacrifices made for freedom.